The girl you see here smiling ear to ear is accused of a brutal crime. She's under arrest for allegedly trying to kill her sleeping boyfriend with a hatchet. We have the story behind this mugshot that has since gone viral, and there is a lot to unpack. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. There's never really a right face to make in a mugshot, because a mugshot is typically being taken at one of, if not the lowest point in somebody's life. But this mugshot has gone viral because of the expression you see on this woman's face. It is the kind that we typically don't see, even with how often we cover stories that involve mugshots here at Law&Crime, and also in cases where the allegations that someone is facing are just so gruesome. Now, the girl you see in this photo smiling is Lena Deoliveira. This is her booking photo from the Cass County Jail in North Dakota. That's where Fargo is. Deoliveira is facing charges for what police say happened around 5:30 in the morning on September 5th. And these are pictures from her Facebook page. She's 23 years old. And this is a picture of the detached garage, the alleged scene of the crime. This is where police say this attack allegedly took place. Now, police were called to this garage in Fargo early in the morning on September 5th, and they found Deoliveira's boyfriend with significant injuries and a trail of blood leading to the garage where all of this allegedly happened. Now, it appears much of this case is based on an eyewitness who says he saw everything. He's a man who was also staying in this detached garage where Deoliveira and her boyfriend were allegedly staying as well, per media outlet Inform. And this is where this story gets disturbing and the details can get gory. The man said he woke up on September 5th around 5:30 in the morning and he heard Deoliveira's boyfriend screaming. And he says that he allegedly saw Deoliveira behind her boyfriend swinging a hatchet. He said he didn't see the impact being made, but he described the sound like, quote, splitting wood. The man said Deoliveira's boyfriend's fingers were missing and he saw blood and a massive mark through the man's skull, allegedly from that hatchet. And he said that it sounded like the hatchet was hitting the headboard of a bed based on the sound. Now, when police arrived, they couldn't find Deoliveira. That witness said that she was homeless, that she had been staying at different homes in the area, as well as the detached garage where all of this allegedly happened. Now, before I get into how law enforcement tracked Deoliveira down, it is clear from her social media that she faced challenges. And this is important context in understanding the story and this suspect. And it is shocking, not just the allegations that she's facing, but shocking because it appears this year that she had been on the up. Here's a post from April 8th when she said, quote, "Did somebody get sober? Promise she'll look good on you." Then on April 14th, she made this long post about how she was taking accountability and getting treatment. She recognized she, quote, "made poor decisions in my whole life and getting help was one of the best decisions she had ever made, quote, for my children and I." In this post, she talked about how she struggled with substance abuse, but that she was taking it on head on and embracing sobriety. Then on April 30th, she proudly marked that she was 30 days sober. Now, anyone who has had substance abuse issues in their family will tell you that 30 days can be a huge accomplishment and that recovery is never a straight line. It is a constant battle, and perhaps Lena Deoliveira could be an example of that. She even proudly posted this certificate of completing an inpatient program in April. Now, another piece of context, you remember Deoliveira saying that she had made a lot of mistakes in her life. We do know that she was in the news back in 2017 when she was just 14 years old. Valley News Live and other media outlets in Minnesota and North Dakota posted a story that she was missing. It's unclear what the circumstances were at that time around the disappearance. But here we are in 2025, and once again, as authorities came upon this alleged gruesome scene where Deoliveira had allegedly attacked her boyfriend with a hatchet, law enforcement was once again on September 5th looking for her, now 23 years old. They put out this flyer looking for information as they were searching for her. But you can see at the top that this was not a missing persons case. This was searching for a suspect, someone who was wanted for attempted murder. On September 7th, 2 days after that alleged hatchet attack, Deoliveira was arrested in Moorhead, Minnesota. That's right across the state line from Fargo, where that alleged attack took place. And this was her mugshot when she was taken into custody. That large smile on her face, a grin that goes ear to ear. She reportedly requested an attorney when authorities questioned her about the attack, she is now being held on a $500,000 bond. Now, as for her boyfriend, according to police that Inform reviewed, that man was able to speak with investigators. This is an attempted murder case, so he is alive. It is unclear at this point what the motive was for this alleged attack. Before we get back to this episode of On the Case, I need to take a moment and talk about something important, because when you cover true crime, you obviously see a lot of stories that show how life can change in an instant in ways you could never expect. I find myself thinking about it a lot when it comes to my own family and making sure my kids' futures are secure and safe. That said, life insurance is one of those things that no one wants to think about until it's too late. I don't want to think of a day where I might not be there for my kids to help pay for college or to keep a roof over their heads. But having a term life insurance policy in place right now means that if something unexpected does happen, your kids will be able to have more protection, and you'll have a little more peace of mind that you did everything in your power to help protect them in the future. Fabric by Gerber Life is term life insurance that you can get done today. It is made for busy parents just like you. It's all online on your schedule, right from your couch. Now, you could be covered in under 10 minutes with no health exam required. What's unique about Fabric is that they've partnered with Gerber Life, trusted by millions of families for over 50 years. Their high-quality policies are designed with flexibility to fit your family and your budget, like up to $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. They also offer all sorts of other features like free digital wills and even investment tools to plan for your family's financial future, and everything is easy to access right from your phone. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. You can apply today in just minutes and at meetfabric.com/OTC. That's meetfabric.com/OTC. meetfabric.com/OTC. Joining us now to talk more about this is forensic psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Bober. Thank you, as always, for taking the time to be with us on Law and Crime. This mugshot, when you see a suspect accused of a pretty gruesome crime, smiling ear to ear, it gets a lot of attention. In your line of work, when you see a mugshot like that, when you see this mugshot, what goes through your mind?
Well, listen, it's very difficult to know exactly what's going on in someone's mind when they take a mugshot like that. But in this particular case, I was particularly struck by the witness that said that she seemed, and I quote, out of it. When I see that someone is out of it, I think about certain things. I think about psychosis, which is literally a departure from reality. I think about dissociation, where people are disconnected from their thoughts and emotions, mania or a severe mood disturbance, or, of course, substance use or intoxication, which, by the way, is a much greater risk factor for violence than mental illness. So what substances are associated with violence? The number one is alcohol. So these are some of the things I think about when I see someone who is, and I quote, out of it.
Right, because she did, just from what we've seen on Facebook, she was on a sobriety journey back in April, 30 days sober, posted a certificate of it, was very proud of that. But then here we are in September, and she allegedly attacks her boyfriend as he's sleeping with a hatchet, knowing that she was out of it. I mean, she did post that in the past she had done meth and fentanyl, and it's unclear whether she relapsed. But those particular drugs, how could that impact a state of mind?
Well, certainly meth is a stimulant. It can make people paranoid. It can make people aggressive. And using a hatchet is very symbolic, right? It's about as up close and personal as you can get. It's raw, it's brutal, it's savage, and it feels like an explosion of violent emotion or disordered thinking. So it doesn't seem cold and calculating as it does someone who is in acute crisis.
And she was reportedly homeless at the time. She struggled with drug use. It's unclear as far as a criminal record whether she's had any sort of violent outbursts in the past. And if she hadn't had any sort of, she doesn't have any violent outbursts in the past, I mean, how common is it if someone suddenly just out of nowhere would grab a hatchet, according to police, and then attack someone as they're sleeping?
Well, obviously, when you're attacking someone that's sleeping, they're in the most vulnerable position possible. This probably was something that was induced by substances, most likely given her history, not 100%. But that combined with maybe any feelings of rage, of jealousy that she had towards him, this probably wasn't an isolated fight. This is probably something that was building and it crescendoed into this explosion of violence. And when you put substances into the mix, it becomes highly, highly unpredictable.
When you say psychosis, and it's kind of, you just think of someone being out of it. And often we talk about mental illness and the challenges that people can have there. I mean, what are, just generally speaking, for someone to become also disillusioned? What can be the cause for that?
So psychosis can be something organic like schizophrenia. It can be something that I talk about all the time, which is cannabis-induced psychosis. So there's cannabis intoxication, and we know the strains of cannabis now have much higher amounts of THC. They can cause people to become paranoid, to become delusional, to have auditory hallucinations. So they can change the person's perception of reality, and it's very difficult to predict what someone who's under the influence of that might do. Now, granted, we're talking about intoxication versus substance-induced psychosis, right? There's the intoxication, which is the acute effect of the substance, and there may be psychosis that is generated from using the substance, which is totally separate and apart.
And for her, I just go back to this mugshot where she's smiling, and this was 2 days after the event. And I also want to be clear that we don't know her side of the story. We don't know if something happened that would have motivated her to do this. When you sit down with people who are accused of crimes like this, how do you go about assessing their mental state and diagnosing them? Maybe not diagnosing, but trying to understand and piece together what's going through their mind.
So obviously we want to make sure that we do a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation, and that would include looking at any pertinent medical history. For example, does the patient have a history of concussions or head injuries? Do they have a history of thyroid disease? Do they have a history of any other medical problem, a neurological problem that could be contributing to this presentation? And then we look at, again, substance use. Are they someone that's known to use substances? Have they had problems with substances in the past? Any past psychiatric history, especially psychiatric history associated with violence. We look at their family history. We look at their level of functioning in their job, in school. We talk to people that knew them leading up to the days, hours, and minutes before the crime occurred to find out about their state of mind. These are just some things that we would do to try to piece it together.
And when you talk to that person and you're trying to what questions do you ask them? When maybe you know a little bit about their medical history and you're trying to pin down what's exactly in their mind?
So again, I would look at their history of violence previously. I would look at their history of substance use. I would just go down basically a list of questions trying to get a history, because as we know, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And so we're looking for a pattern of behavior that is leading up to this offense.
For a mugshot like that, and I guess this is more the legal side of it, but I'm sure prosecutors would look at this if they're making, and also the defense, if there was some sort of insanity argument or mental health argument to make in a trial, that you put this mugshot up. How have you seen mugshots like this, where you look at it and you're like, this is not, just the kind of, I think the instant human reaction is like, this is not someone who's in the right state of mind. No one is if you're accused of a crime like this, but how can an image like that play into the trial and the perception that a jury has about someone's mental state?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. Think about it. It's all about how you tell the story, right? If you're the prosecution, you say that this is someone who's cold, who's callous, who has a smirk on their face, who enjoyed it, who shows no remorse. And if you're the defense, you say this is someone who's completely checked out. They're out of touch with reality. They had no idea what they were doing. They didn't know the difference between right and wrong. So again, you could take the same evidence and tell a very different story.
And for her, I think back, because when you see the picture and your initial reaction as you start piecing the story together is that, this is someone, again, who doesn't seem to be in the right state of mind. And then when you dive into her story of who she is and you see that, she goes on this 30-day sobriety journey, she finishes in an inpatient facility, and you would look at that and say that things are on the up. And then something happens between then and April and then where we are now in September, allegedly. Typically, how often do you see that when someone, maybe they have success in the inpatient world, but then once they get back out, and she was homeless reportedly as well, and I know that that's a challenge. I mean, how common do you see someone relapse and then maybe go down a very dark path?
Well, listen, homelessness is a huge factor in people who relapse. Unfortunately, there's a tremendous stigma against people who have addiction. People just kind of look at it as a character weakness. Sorry. People just look at it as a basic character defect or weakness. And so there's a lot of judgment about addiction, but addiction is a brain disease where people use substances compulsively despite negative consequences. And if they don't have an adequate living space or a roof over their head, that is definitely a large risk factor when it comes to relapse.
When it comes to an inpatient facility, just in generally speaking, what does someone do over the course of those 30 days to try to get sober?
So very often, depending on the substance, they may have to go through a detox. There are certain substances that can be life-threatening if you're detoxing from them, particularly alcohol or drugs like sedatives, particularly what we call benzodiazepines. So very often, the first few weeks is spent just trying to get them off the substance safely so they don't have seizures and that their life is not in danger. And then, there's a variety of different things. There's 12-step programs. There's individual therapy. It really depends on the substance. But, in my experience, it usually takes longer than 30 days for someone to have a good shot at maintaining sobriety or staying clean, because it takes time for the brain to go through those changes where they're using sort of the thinking part of their brain and not the emotional part, because addiction is very powerful and people are literally sitting there and their brain is telling them use or die. They are more willing to use substances than eat, than maintain their relationships, than maintain their occupation. They are literally looking at it like life and death. That is how strong that craving is to use the substance at the exclusion of everything else healthy in their life.
I think the term insane is used a lot and probably beyond the definition just in general and conversationally in society. But in terms of the legal system, and if there was an insanity defense that someone would make, if someone looks at the mugshot and they say, this is someone who's insane, what would actually need to be proven in court if that was going to be a defense?
So it depends on the jurisdiction where it occurred, obviously. But we're getting into nuance now. But substance intoxication is not going to work for the insanity defense. Now, psychosis secondary to substance use might be able to be used. But ultimately, if it's just substance intoxication, it won't be a valid defense. It will be a mitigator.
When it comes to psychosis, and how do you determine whether someone could have actually been in a moment where they just literally lost their mind and something like this happened? And I mean, is that the reality where someone can then just snap out of it and be like, oh my gosh, I can't realize what I just did?
So if it's intoxication, it can persist for several hours. We try to get more information than just the person themselves who were affected by it. We try to speak to the people that were closest to them. Did someone see her in the hours before this happened or the minutes before it happened? Try to get an idea of what their state of mind was, how they were interacting with other people before this happened, to try to get an accurate picture.
Because I know it probably differs state to state, but if the defense in a case like this would try to make a mental health argument, and we don't have access to her medical records to know if she had been diagnosed with some sort of medical condition in the past, but if they were to make an argument to, that a judge was going to allow them to say that this was a psychosis type situation, she lost her mind, and I'm more generally speaking about this and just how these cases work, what type of evidence would they actually need to have to be able to present to the court to say that this is the defense that we are going to try to make?
So the burden is going to be on the defense to make that argument, right? And so now you're going to look at things like her prior mental health history. Was there a history of psychosis before? Was there a history of aggression during a psychotic episode? So it's all going to be in historical context. And again, looking at the events leading really up to the minutes before this happened to see if you can get someone that can say, yeah, she seemed like she was totally off. She was totally checked out. She didn't seem like she was in touch with reality. To try to establish that she essentially did not know the difference between right and wrong. But again, substance intoxication is not going to be able to be used for that purpose to prove that someone was not aware of their actions, that they were right or wrong, it's going to be very difficult to try to go that way, because it's not going to work. They're going to have to show some other mental illness separate and apart from intoxication to try to use for the insanity defense, which, contrary to popular belief, is rarely successful. It's rarely used, and even less rarely successful.
Right, because it's often, I feel like you would think, just if you're not someone who regularly deals with the legal system, you would say this person is not of the right state of mind, but then there's
Right.
a very specific legal definition to hit. She's charged with attempted murder. I mean, it's likely that she will go and face prison time, knowing that she's struggled with substance abuse, according to her Facebook page, in the past. I mean, and she's going to be tried in North Dakota, so maybe not specifically about North Dakota, but just in general. I mean, what type of issues could she face in the prison system, or what kind of resources are there within the prison system for someone who's struggling when it comes to substance abuse and could be going away for a long time?
So I've worked in several Department of Corrections in a variety of different states, and a lot of the departments of correction do have substance abuse resources, because there's such a high percentage of people who are incarcerated who suffer from not only mental illness but substance use disorders. So there are resources, there's 12-step meetings, there's individual counseling. Obviously, it depends on funding and resources, but that's definitely something that she should take advantage of while she's incarcerated, if she were to be found guilty.
Because I know that we often talk about the lack of mental health or substance abuse resources on the outside. Do you find when someone goes to prison, when they're dealing with some of these issues, that they can actually be rehabilitated in that way through actually being in the prison system? Because I know that that's a big debate right now when it comes to people struggling to find resources on the outside.
I do. I have seen people, patients of mine, who've been incarcerated and who were able to stay clean and get help in the Department of Corrections. It's not something I commonly see, but I have seen it before. I have seen success stories of people that re-enter the community and are productive citizens, but it really depends on the resources that are available. And obviously, if they have family support, that is definitely a huge plus for them, to get them sober and to keep them clean as well.
And we'll see, some of the details continue to trickle out on this story out of Fargo, North Dakota. Dr. Daniel Bober, forensic psychiatrist, thank you as always for taking the time to be with us on Law and Crime and helping us understand these issues a little bit better.
My pleasure.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.